Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart to Heart. And we are on episode 4 today. Our very special guest is a multi-hyphenate project-based artist, and he was also a classmate of mine at OSA. He's a recent Ottawa School of Art graduate, and he is currently an Ottawa U MFA. Please welcome Joel Secter. Yay! How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, trying to thrive and survive during this pandemic, right? That's all we
Yes.
can do.
The third wave is proving to be quite a ride.
Oh, don't get me started. I was gonna make a surfing wave joke, but no.
Another time. When we're through it.
Exactly. I'm digging the background. Where are you located?
I am in the spray booth of the University of Ottawa School of Visual Arts. And it's somewhere I've been working lately. So I figured it'd be fun to shoot in here and, make me look a little younger too.
Jeez. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? So you and I, we were students together at the Ottawa School of Art, and just getting to know you, you have such an interesting sort of entrance into the arts world. But before you got into the arts world, you were in film.
Yeah.
And
Which I consider part of the arts
still
world.
part of the arts world, but not really like what we were like exposed to at school kind of thing.
It's so true.
Yeah, it's a completely different art form in itself. But you had a motion picture in your film that was called Best of Sector, and the Rest of Sector won the best documentary at the Whistler Film Fest. So not
Yes.
everyone can say that they have won an award such as that. So can you talk about like that whole experience and what that was all like, how that came about?
Well, it was certainly a high point, so I'm happy to revisit it. Winning Best Documentary at the Whistler Film Festival in 2005 was sort of the culmination of many years of, I guess, growing fascination with film and cinema that all sort of revolved around my uncle David Secter, who is a queer film pioneer. And I knew a bit about his background, like as a kid growing up, but the films he made in the 60s and 70s were already kind of dated when I came around, and we didn't really get into that until I was a bit older. But when I did finally discover him and begin to appreciate his work, I got really caught up in that story and wanted to tell it so badly that I devoted several years of my life to making a movie about it. And that film, The Best of Sector and the Rest of Sector, is available on YouTube for anyone who wants to check it out. It's a lot of fun. And okay, excellent. It was sort of an opportunity for me to tell his story and also bring myself into the picture and to make a movie. At that time, I was obsessed with movie making, and this was the story I was dying to tell. And I was quite delighted with the way it turned out, but it was also very challenging. It was my first real exposure to an art endeavor of that magnitude, and it was painstaking at every step. And so now looking back, I'm very proud of the work, and I think it still holds up. But it's also difficult to know how I had to settle in certain regards, because there's time limitations and budget restrictions. So it wasn't easy, but I got it done. And, the Whistler Award was a highlight. We sold to CBC here in Canada and the Independent Film Channel and Sundance Channel in the US. So it was, it was a success. But I got to tell you, it was so hard that afterward I was like wrestling between making another movie or trying something different, and it seemed like a good idea to go to law school at the time. If only I could make six figures and become a lawyer, I'd be happy. So that was my hypothesis back in 2005, 6, 7, and I started law school here in Ottawa in 2007.
And that kind of dives into what I was going to ask you next, because after that you got into law. So that's what I was wondering is like, what made you transition from like one world to like another?
Well,
They're
you
quite
know,
different.
it's true, and I think that this idea that we're exploring will sort of inform viewers to look like how to look at my work. But like I say, after making the documentary, which cost a lot of money and took a lot of time and all my energy, I was unsure how to go forward in life, and like I say, was either going to make another movie or try something else. And my hypothesis was that if I went to law school, I'd be set professionally, and everything would just fall into place. And I took those steps, went to school, became a lawyer, got a job, and was practicing. But truthfully, it wasn't a natural fit for me. And as much as I enjoyed working with my colleagues and clients, I wasn't happy. The work I was doing in law happened to be in the charity and not-for-profit sector. And so all the arts organizations in town became, targets for me to land as clients. And so little by little, I started to provide legal services to, the various arts organizations in Ottawa and nationally over time. I was right in the mix, which was very exciting, but I also was wearing a suit and doing the legal work and getting very envious of all the artists who were, rolling up their sleeves and being creative. And so it was at that time that I started to think about, circling back to art. But for whatever reason, was thinking in terms of visual arts at that point, as opposed to film and TV and motion pictures,
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, not just your generation or mine, but we can all relate to, having this mindset that we should have a set 9 to 5 in order to be like stable and successful and happy. And, that like for a lot of us, that's not really the case, right? Like what drives your passion and your happiness is like being dedicated to what you really want to do. And not everyone can say that. Not everyone
No,
can say that.
that 9 to 5 structure was definitely ingrained in me, like growing up, being, a little bit older, that was like you become professional and do that sort of, for the rest of your life. But I wasn't adapting well to the program, and could see how, how I needed to free myself up from some of those constraints. But I will admit it's a difficult thing to do, and I'm very, very privileged to have been able to go to law school in the first place, and then to actually pivot and try, making art for the time that I did. So I recognize that for most people, they just don't have that luxury. So I'm very, very fortunate in that regard. When I went to the Ottawa School of Art, it was only for a year to try their portfolio program. And I think, well, at least the way I presented at the time was that I would return to the legal practice, which I never did.
Decided no.
Well, I found that the program was so invigorating, and I just found that I was getting into things that needed further exploration. It would have been too soon to turn back. So I doubled down and stayed with the diploma program.
I did the same thing as you. I started off in the portfolio for 1 year. I'm like, well, we'll just feel it out and see. And then I actually like really got invested and like was still trying to find myself as a person as well as my identity as an artist. So I think, just I had to stay on.
Yeah.
We had to stay on and like figure out like what our path is.
And I will give a huge shout out to the Ottawa School of Art. I had an amazing experience there, and I found that there was a big difference between taking like evening hobby courses, which I experimented with, and diving in head first into the portfolio program, which was immersive and all consuming.
Mm-hmm. I feel the same. Like I had taken evening courses as well, but I feel like during the day you are like the classes during the day are more targeted towards your personal projects, your personal aspirations and concepts and things like that, what styles and types that you want to get into. So if you are, shout out to Ottawa School of Art. If you are starting out in the arts, definitely start out with their evening courses. But if you are looking to get into a program, definitely start off in portfolio. And then if you want to continue, go to diploma. It's a super
Yeah.
awesome program.
Yeah, and I'll even go further by saying that like I came there with, with no experience other than my filmmaking background, but no experience in drawing and painting and sculpture and the traditional, art making techniques. And they embraced me and gave me, all that I needed to succeed, and never ever told me I couldn't do what I wanted. So it
Mm-hmm.
was really, really healthy place for me to experiment and get on my feet.
Yeah. Like I find that you're never told like that you're doing something right or wrong, but they're guiding you towards like maybe this is not your style, or like very not negative but constructive criticism as
Yeah,
well, which I
yeah,
think we all need. We don't need sugarcoating in the art industry. We don't. We had a few classes together at school, and we've both seen our different series and the way we practice. And even looking at your work now, there's such a variety of what kind of work you create in terms of mediums and concepts. So I've seen your Gucci series when you were working on that, as well as your brief series. But looking at your work now, they're complete, like they're so different. And I was wondering like what inspires all these different concepts that you have, but also the mediums that you choose for each concept. Because there's such a huge spectrum that your work, there's a huge variety.
I think, I mean, I totally get the question and will respond to it, but I don't entirely see it the same. I mean, first of all, I was learning all along the way. So when you refer to the It's All Gucci series, that, as you know, reflected taking an abstract expressionist painting class. And I was, sort of exploring those who came before in the work of Barnett Newman and Andy Warhol and Guido Molinari. And with color briefs, it was again where I was at the time. I was taking color theory and trying to really get a handle on all the different colors and also mediums. But in that series, it started with painting, and then it evolved to well, it was, Andrew said to me, Andrew Fay, my instructor at the time, what if you make it huge? And that was really quite a revelation, because I hadn't considered scale as being such a variable and potentially exciting factor to play with. But when I did try it on, they became small, medium, large, and extra large in these various mediums, and so I've always tried to push ideas as far as I could go, and I don't really think that I'm like limited to being a painter or a sculptor or mixed media artist. And interestingly, like the original sort of Gucci painting that's modeled after Voice of Fire is something that's coming up for me right now. I just produced a video of the script tape strip that I'm using to wrap a sculpture in, and watching it, it's like it could be projected on Voice of Fire. It's so sort of in that vein. But so I have a lot of ideas. I've always had a lot of ideas. For a while I thought they made great film ideas, and then I thought they made great business ideas, and I didn't actually find that they were translating to film or business successfully. But when I entered the sort of visual arts realm, I found that my ideas did translate. And all of a sudden, I was able to communicate in a way that I hadn't really found I was able to before. And the other sort of aspect is that I just like being able to do it all myself. In film, just by comparison, you're so reliant on many people to achieve your vision. Whereas in the visual arts, at least for the most part, I can do most of it myself. But coming back to your question about ideas, I mean, I just have ideas, and then I explore them, and I let them sort of tell me what materials are appropriate. And then I find that like now I'm getting to a point where it's like I have an idea and I get into it, and then the work starts to tell me where to go. Like I used to be quite literal, and I think I am still quite literal, but I'm now that I'm going through the MFA program, I'm detaching a bit from that and letting some of that vision, like because in film, when you're a director, you need to be able to close your eyes and see the movie. You know, everybody's coming to you with questions and asking you, you know, is it going to be, you know, black or white or blue or red or whatever, and you need to have answers for all those questions. But being so overdetermined in visual arts isn't always, good, good for process. So the ideas are just like, yeah, they're always there. And I've got like just, my notepads, and I'm just sort of like unpacking them one by one. But when I started this program, I was thinking about personal stories, how to maybe, tell those stories through visual art without necessarily being autobiographical. And well, so I started like with, a certain approach, and it's changing. So like as I continue to learn and grow, my approach changes, my thinking changes, my mediums change. So, but I see a lot of commonality, like whether it's line or shape and form, I can make all kinds of connections between work that might not appear at all similar to an observer.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to evolve in a sense, and I'm going through that constantly. Just as an example, like you might be attached to things being a certain way, and it can be difficult to adapt to practical considerations, and to pivot along the way. But sometimes that can lead you to places that were unexpected, but can be also quite magical,
Mm-hmm.
So it's about finding the appropriate starting place, and then, and having a vision, but also allowing for, I guess, enough freedom to explore. And that's a big difference between where I am now and where I was a year ago. The project so between the Ottawa School of Art and the MFA, I was in a studio at Studio Space Ottawa, which is a new development in town, which is great if anybody can get in there. So in that studio, I was working on a project that was like, even before I started doing anything, I knew exactly how I wanted it to look. And then I went about basically making the work. I could have hired other people to execute it for me. It was that precise, but I don't. But here at the University of Ottawa and the MFA, they're encouraging me to sort of let go of some of that and really embrace process and let the work build upon itself, if you know what I mean.
You have participated in multiple group and solo exhibitions. Is there anyone that is your favorite?
I think you're being a little complimentary there. I haven't actually exhibited that much, and certainly not as much as I'd like. And the truth is that most of my exhibition has revolved around the Ottawa School of Art. I had my first solo show there in the Lima Tassi Gallery. I participated in a number of group shows that they had. I was scheduled to have a solo show at the Fritzie Gallery, GCTC. That got postponed due to the pandemic. And I recently had a work in the, or a series of works in the diploma exhibition out at Shankman. And I do have some other work around town, but it's very challenging to get work seen, to be honest. And so I don't have a lot of exhibition history. What I can say is that I was delighted with color briefs. Like I put everything I had into that. And what was so wonderful about it for me was that I was satisfied. I kind of wanted to plant that seed when we were talking about the documentary. Like the documentary is great about my uncle. I'm very, very happy with it. But it was a challenge. It was my first like long format film, and I was trying to tell like a big story and weave myself into it at the same time. So it was tricky on a limited budget in the tight time frame when we actually got money to edit. So I struggled a bit there and was never ever satisfied, even though I did as much, like I did well with it. But with color briefs, I was just like, I was so happy. I was like, I don't want to change a thing. I was just totally content. And so that show, stands out for me as the example that I can be happy. That art isn't always frustration and settling. That I can be satisfied with my work.
Hmm. And you're right. It's outside of the school, it's so hard to, it's not just like you're out of school and, you can get a job with some business or something or other, it's building a name for yourself outside of school. It's so tricky. Like, thank goodness for us that we've made connections through the school, we have acquaintances, so we have these connections, but we're still essentially building from the ground up. So it's so tricky. But what I loved about color briefs is the cabinet. Oh, I loved it.
Yes.
I love the placement with the cabinet. That was so
Thank you.
clever. And
Well, yeah, and I thought I mean, at that time I thought being clever was really like an asset, and I think it is to a certain extent. But I envisioned this this installation, but it would all like the paintings would go into a filing cabinet, so it would serve for me as a color database moving forward. So I could go and look at the difference between cobalt blue and cerulean blue. But it would also be a sales catalog. So if someone came along and said, I love this series of yours, they could choose their favorite color and size, and I would make it. So thank you for mentioning that. That was a fun thing to do.
it was just so clever. And when you said, size and placement counts, I had taken into consideration like clothing sizes, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
like small in the filing cabinet, large prints or paintings. I never like it's such a clever and playful way of thinking and placement and creating. So I really really enjoyed that.
If I may speak to that further, there's something in that work that runs even deeper that I still haven't quite figured out how to articulate. Like when I think back to the 90s and the 2000s, when Vice magazine really got going, and how American Apparel was in tandem with them and basically advertising in all their issues. Um, and it was so much part of our culture for a time. And like so here is American Apparel funding the magazine, which is sort of teaching us how to look at the world, and Vice magazine at that time especially was quite irreverent. And so I'm not even sure exactly what I'm trying to say, but I think looking at American Apparel now, um, there's something more to it. I mean, at the time, I was interested in the idea of labor. That I was willing to spend hours making these paintings, and yet we couldn't afford to pay people to make the underwear anymore. I mean, and it's a problem. It's still a problem because all my underwear is falling apart, and I have no replacements. But I thought I was talking about labor and some meaty issues, even though it was like poppy and colorful and playful. And I still think there's something more to it that deserves further investigation. And that is this whole connection to broader youth culture and what role both American Apparel, but also by funding the magazine Vice, like with that, how that played. And there's a whole culture, like, it was like borderline pornographic. And Vice magazine's, American Apparel's founder Dov was someone who behaved terribly in the workplace by all accounts. So I don't know. I'm not even sure what I'm saying anymore. But I think there's something in that work that's still yet to come to the surface.
Based on what we see as a viewer, but also what you just described, it's powerful to two aspects. It's powerful in terms of like bright energy, like because those are the colors that you have shown through your color briefs. You show us joy and brightness and energy, positivity, but then there's also this other problem that you are trying to portray that we don't necessarily get to see. It's like one of those things where don't judge a book by its cover, and you really have to look at you really don't know what it's about until you read the description or you read the story behind it. So it's one
And
of those very versatile works.
and I think that idea that you're touching on is still running through my work. Like I'm working through a series, well, I've just sort of completed a series now called Transitions. And I wanted to look at adolescence and explore this idea of measuring up. So I zoomed in on skateboarding, in 1985 when I was 12, turning 13, that was like my obsession. And, we all, dreamed of building, an epic half pipe. And I remember like the scariest thing I ever did at that time was dropping in, nearly breaking my neck like everybody does their first time. But I zeroed in on the transitions, which are the shapes that you cut into the plywood sheets to make the curves. And that's become sort of the visual motif. I mean, in the same way that I was using the underwear as a visual motif in color briefs, I'm using the transitions as a visual motif with transitions. And so when you look at it, even when you're looking at a model of the ramp that I built and the abstract pieces that have been built, you don't see the connection, and it's right before your eyes. And then I've painted around the edge of the thing, so you actually have to look to see things that aren't apparent. So that's coming through my work. And I think that I'll be the first to admit that like the world isn't as it appears, and it can be quite profound when you discover how things really are. So I guess that's a theme that I'm interested in.
I've always found your work so interesting. I always find myself thinking of always something different. It always keeps my mind active. I always don't know what I always don't know what I'm thinking, and I like that.
Well, I think that's a good thing, but at the same time, there a lot of thought does go into it, and there's a lot of layers. And I think that what I'm trying to do now is show the layers to the viewer in a way that allows them at least to have a richer experience. Like I think that initially I was looking at trying to communicate intention, so that this is what I intend the viewer to experience. Now I recognize that I can't control that. So regardless of what my intentions may be, viewers are going to interpret any work, however they like. And so it's not so much that I want to communicate a code as much as I want to reveal the layers so that people can have a richer experience. So in this work, Transitions, that I've been talking about, you'll see how it progresses, and that will, I think, help you transition from one thing to the other. So I think that's showing an evolution. It's something I'm trying to develop in my practice anyway.
Even this pandemic, has your creative process changed at all?
I don't feel like it's changed on account of the pandemic. When the pandemic, when we went into lockdown in March of 2020, I basically went into the basement and produced a body of work titled MJ Hand Job. And that was something I could do with an HB pencil and a pad of butcher paper. And it's something that's actually very personal, and I think timely. It sort of approaches the notion of cancel culture, and I think it's great work that I did at home. But it also sort of reflects, I guess, that predetermined mindset. So like I knew what I was doing, and I just basically had to execute on my vision. So the biggest shift, I think, has occurred during the pandemic, but not on account of the pandemic. I mean, meaning now that I'm at the University of Ottawa in the MFA, I'm experiencing profound shifts. And it's during the pandemic, but it's not because of the pandemic. And as much as it absolutely sucks, I've been having an incredible time. I've produced a lot of work that I think is great. And it's 5 or 6 bodies of work in the past year that I'm really proud of, and that I think could go anywhere. So, as much as it's been a terrible time, I haven't been, less productive as a result.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, I retreat to the studio as much as I can, because it's somewhere where I'm alone and able to basically do whatever I want.
Your safe space.
Yeah, it's like a bomb shelter. I actually love it. So
Yeah.
it's been very, very conducive to work. I think I have 2 kids and they're teenagers, and it's really hard to see how their lives have been affected. Like they can't hang out with their friends, and do what normal teenagers do. So I feel like it's been harder on them.
So, apart from art, what has been keeping you busy during this pandemic?
Gosh, I mean, there was a time when I was getting in shape with my son, but I can't say that anymore. Although I'm, now that it's spring, summer, it's time to get back into shape. Truthfully, it's like feeding the family and then working in between. So it's been, just about keeping everybody fed and working.
Yeah. And being locked up, what else can we do? Right?
Yeah.
Like, especially.
Well, the truth is that art making is very time consuming.
Yeah.
And it's not just in the making, but in the thinking. So you really, it so much goes into the work that only, like, I think an artist can really, truly appreciate. And so it's time consuming. My kids wonder what happened to me.
Well, I thought it's just an idea. Well, no, there's more than just an idea there. You gotta sit and think, sit in your idea, and you gotta think about it.
Yeah.
It's like a job, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned transitions, but apart from transitions, is there anything else that you're working on? I know you mentioned like 5 or 6 series or pieces. Any secret projects?
No, the way I'm sort of working, like even coming back to Gucci, like I imagine with that series that I'd be making those paintings forever. Like people would come along and they tell me their sizes, and we'd custom make. It's all Gucci painting for them, and each painting is distinguished by its measurements and its sort of homage to a different artist. And similarly, color briefs. Like when I designed that, the idea is that I would have a studio one day and be cranking out more briefs like for all time. And so I imagine at some point circling back to these ideas and taking them further. But at least now, like I continue to educate myself and progress in this way. I move on. So transitions, like when I started transitions and looking at adolescence, I had like 10 ideas, and I actually presented it to my class as a ball bearing with 10 different ideas. Transitions is one. So and it's turned into like this body of work with multiple pieces in different mediums. So I could stay in this place for like transitions and just keep working these ideas further, and they're not at all the same in concept or medium. But no, I think, like, so for example, in the program, the MFA, like I present my work on Wednesday of next week, and then the following Wednesday we begin another semester, and I will undertake all new work.
Oh, wow.
So, and I don't know that I need to. There are some students who carry their work from term to term and they work through ideas, but I tend to be. That's why I sort of describe myself as project based. I don't know how to describe myself, but I think others would see what I'm doing as project based. And so I don't know what's next. I kind of like to look at the professor or instructor I'm working with and say, where are they coming from, and what might I learn, and then adapt my thinking accordingly. But I will say that I have this like idea that I'm telling stories. So at least in the MFA, I started with a new beginning on like revealing a chair, and then I went into like naming and ritual in my religion, and then went into childhood innocence with my confessional piece, and then now with adolescence. So there's a bit of a chronology. So I've been thinking about certain next phases of my life in the chronology, but things don't have to go that in sequence. So there's all kinds of ideas that are like popping around, but I don't actually know what I'm going to do next.
Where can everyone find your work?
Well, my website is joelsecter.com, spelled JOELSECTER, and Instagram. Really, I mean, everything that's worth posting is there. But hopefully, at a gallery soon. I think that a lot of the work that I'm doing isn't, for sale. Like it's not the kind of stuff you see at the coffee shop. Although I do have some work at Le Souk at the present time, which is a chain of, hybrid grocery store, cafe slash market here in Ottawa, and they're showing some of my Never Dull prints, which I kind of see as like my my brand. And otherwise, hopefully I'll get a show soon. Hopefully we'll all get shows soon and be seeing art in real life again.
Yeah, not just online. There's only so much you can see online. You can't see the textures. You don't get that. There's a screen blocking the feeling, if that makes sense.
Well,
Fingers
it makes
crossed.
total sense. It makes total sense, because I think that what what's so special about art is how it can make us feel,
Mhm,
and that doesn't work as well over the internet.
mhm,
So I do think it's essential to be able to see work in person to
mhm.
really appreciate and enjoy it.
Thank you, Joel, for joining me today. If you are
Thank you.
interested in Joel's work, I will leave all the handles and uh no, I will leave all of Joel's handles down below. And thank you for tuning in today, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye.